Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network designed specifically for higher ed marketing leaders. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, hosted by Jamie Hunt, Chief Marketing Officer at Old Dominion University, has become an industry favorite. The show is sort of like a conference in a podcast, offering a blend of professional wisdom, innovative ideas, and personal anecdotes. Whether you're a higher ed marketer, a faculty member curious about the behind the scenes of university branding, or just someone with an interest in the intersection of education and marketing, the podcast is your gateway to the lesser known narratives of higher education. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, a podcast that addresses the do's, don'ts, and dynamics of the digital ecosystem specific to higher education. I'm your host, Jenny Li Fowler. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education social media management and marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hello, friends. I am excited to introduce you to Matt Nazario Miller, pronouns he, they. Matt currently serves as a communications manager with HR Communications at Stanford University, a strategic role focused on talent management as well as diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for the staff community. Matt also has extensive experience in social media spanning from K-12 into higher ed. Hello, Matt. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into higher ed social.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and fun fact is I was actually born at Stanford, and I now work there. So
Really?
yes, all these years later, I ended up full circle back at Stanford, where I was born to Puerto Rican and Honduran parents who had just relocated to the Bay Area from New York City. And I also now live in New York City. So lots of full circle
Wow.
moments in my story.
Amazing.
But I first got into social media by accident, which I sense is a common thread with a lot of people who end up in this work.
Yeah, I think so.
So I was a student, I was actually a nursing student when I was an undergrad for the first couple of years, but I got into this internship by getting to know other students on campus. I learned that there was an opportunity to work in the central marketing communications office at my university. It was a brand new internship. Social media was still relatively new in terms of being a part of the mix for marketing communication strategy for universities. So my role was really to produce content, to work on student storytelling, and to think about how we used our digital platforms to tell the story of the university life. And I loved it. So I came back to it a little bit later. I took a path into student affairs work and student development work right after undergrad, but circled back to marketing comms in the education space afterward. So got into it by accident and stuck with it on purpose after that.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of us that are in the industry or in the space. It sort of was a part of the other responsibilities as assigned, and it just got to be a bigger percentage of our work. Well, so I'm really excited to dig in to this very pertinent and sometimes hard conversation to have. But why don't we start by having you define what allyship for the LGBTQ plus community means?
Sure. I'll start with defining allyship and then I'll apply it to the LGBTQIA
Perfect.
plus community. So, from my experience, especially with my background in diversity, equity, and inclusion, allyship over the years started out as kind of a badge of honor that you earned by doing the right thing and advocating for communities that you're not necessarily a part of. My evolved understanding of allyship over time has been that it's a practice. It's the behaviors and actions and decisions that we each make day in and day out to support the experiences of marginalized communities that we are not a part of. So, in other words, you're supporting groups of people where you don't necessarily have any skin in the game yourself in terms of how it goes for those folks. So when I apply that to the LGBTQIA plus community, which I'll mostly refer to as the queer community from here on out, allyship for the queer community means that you may not necessarily identify as someone who is part of the queer community. However, the actions and behaviors and decisions that you make are meant to support and uplift the LGBTQIA plus or queer community, whether that's in work or in your day-to-day life.
And I think actions, right? Actions is a key word here. It's not just, posting something on our social channels that says Happy Pride Month, or it's more like, having it regular, the actions you do and having it really be a part representing that community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a member of the queer community, July is always one of the saddest months for me because we come
Mm.
off of the heels of Pride Month, where everything is about queerness and the LGBTQIA plus experience. But then July 1st, the branded logos with rainbows come down and the posts kind of stop when really, like every other recognition month out there, we should be talking about these experiences and uplifting these voices throughout the year. And I think there's ways for folks in social media to do that and to calendar that and plan around that so that it's not an experience for your audience where they get sad on July 1st when they see
Hmm.
they're no longer represented on your channels or in your stories because it's not Pride Month, right?
Right. So this is why it was really important for me to have this conversation with you today, because I feel like this is also a challenge for me as a social media manager as well, is really being a good ally on our social media channels, not just for 1 month, but for all year round, right? So help us see what allyship looks like on social media. What does it look like on social media all year round?
When I think about applying allyship and practicing allyship on social media, a lot of the work comes before you even get to publishing that post or creating that campaign. A lot of the work happens behind the scenes. So I think there's some work that needs to be done, each of us individually, thinking about our own identities and our positionality in this work. What identities do you have, and what are you bringing to the table each day as a social media manager? What does your team look like? What does your leadership look like at your institution? What are their values? And how is that playing into the direction that you're receiving and the support that you receive when you do create social plans and develop content? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done behind the scenes first. Assuming you're in a place where you are supported and you do feel like you have colleagues who are on the same page about uplifting and putting a spotlight on diverse voices and experiences in your community, then I think what it can look like is storytelling and focusing storytelling throughout the year, not just during a particular month, on those experiences within your community, whether that's students or faculty engaging in research that's related to queer issues. Allyship takes on many different forms, and a part of it is also coalition building too. So to be able to uncover those stories, I think each of us in social media management roles has the unique opportunity to build bridges in our communities and set up things like quarterly meetings with student leaders or faculty leaders or staff leaders who are in the driver's seat when it comes to queer issues on and off campus, and just listening and asking them what's going on in your world right now. That may or may not lead to action, right? It could mean you just simply have a greater awareness of what's happening, and that may or may not influence what you post on social. But it also could guide you to think about, well, what kinds of stories have we been telling, and are they aligned with the issues that I'm hearing from folks on the ground when I have those moments where we've developed those bridges and we're talking to each other. So a lot of it is talking to each other and developing that awareness, which is part of a multicultural competency model that I like to follow and that I've learned also over the years in DEI work. And I'll give you some of these resources too to share afterward.
Great.
But the model is a kind of a three-step model where it's awareness, knowledge, and then skills. So that's kind of a framework that each of us can use day in and day out to frame the kinds of information we look for and how we listen to each other. So a lot of it can just be building that awareness.
So what I'm hearing, I think, is, you know, the storytelling is really important, and for us to find the right people or members of the queer community that on your campuses that are willing and wanting to tell their story, it just takes listening on our part, maybe a little bit of like, um I don't know if fact finding is the right word, but just to find the folks on campuses that want to tell their stories, and then giving our channels, giving them our channels to amplify their stories. Is
Yeah,
that
that's
sound right?
absolutely right. I
Okay.
I feel like that's kind of the magic of this work that we get to do in communications. And this is always a connection that I've seen even from when I was a student employee between the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion work and social media work. They go hand in hand for me because we get to say who has a spotlight, whose story matters enough to get posted on our channels. And also, we get to design the approach in a way where we're able to lend the driver's seat to the person whose story we want to uplift. So I think where some people go a wayward way with practicing allyship is that they forget that they're not supposed to be the ones in the driver's seat. We're supposed to be more of a passenger, and the vehicle is being driven by someone who is of the community that you are hoping to uplift. So in this case, that would be someone who identifies as queer, and you're simply supporting and lending them the channel and the voice to get that story out there.
So how do we proactively find those folks or the members of the queer community on our campuses? Is it through active student groups? This can be a challenge for some of us, I think.
Where I liked to go when I was a social strategist in this role was, yes, to student groups who are doing events and have a prominent voice on campus, and letting them know that this channel and this mechanism even exists. So if I think back to before I knew about all of this as a first year student, before I got my internship, I had no idea that there were actual people behind these flagship social media accounts posting things, and that there was a strategy, and there was a whole team behind it, and that I could even be a part of it. So I think part of it is having your increasing your visibility on campus by sending emails to these student groups or to faculty who might be faculty or staff who might be mentors or facilitators
Mhm.
for these student groups. Those are also really great resources to call upon to ask them, can I just set up 30 minutes to have coffee or tea with you and learn more about what
Mm.
it is your group is doing this year? And it, like I said before, it might not be something you can action on immediately. It might be something that you build up over time so that the next year you have established that bond, you have a greater sense of awareness of what they're up to. And then when you're thinking about plotting in content on your content calendar or designing campaigns that speak to your institutional values, it's not going to feel as transactional if you just reach out in that moment and say, we want to make a post tomorrow. What are y'all doing? Also, hi, hello. You never knew I existed, but I want this content from you.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense because relationship building is a lot of what we do. And we're always building trust with our community members and leadership. So this just is an extension of that. And I love your idea of reaching out to staff employee resource groups because there are a lot out there, and we totally sort of forget to tap into those resources as well. When it comes to allyship and, cultural, I don't even know, like, I don't even know what the word is, but sometimes depending on what the public perception is at the time, and I feel like this ebbs and flows, but right now the social landscape is volatile. It feels like DEI is under attack. So, do you have any recommendations on how social media managers navigate this time?
I think a part of it is grace and giving grace to yourself at this time, knowing that we're not going to get it right every single time. However, what is good here is that there's a willingness to understand, there's a willingness to lean in and develop that awareness and that knowledge so you can get to the part where you develop skills for integrating these stories into your social content. That goes a long way. So I think knowing and acknowledging, at least to yourself, that we might not get it right every single time, but we're doing the right thing by practicing allyship is a part of the puzzle. I also think about how often, especially in higher ed, we can silo ourselves to our institutions even, and we have to talk to each other. I think there's really great networks on Meta or on X or various groups that we can join to learn from other folks who are asking the same questions, who might be looking for feedback on a campaign. I see these kinds of posts all the time in higher ed social media manager groups. And I think it's awesome. I think we need more of that because what we think we're experiencing at Stanford, for instance, I always think I know someone else at another university
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
experiencing this too or has already gone through this. So, what can I learn from them, even in a group thread discussion about this? So, I think part of it is building those coalitions with other institutions. And also, it helps you to give a heads up to other institutions too who might not be there yet and
Mm.
pose the question like, have you thought about how your audiences might be receiving this at this time given this event that's happening in the world? And also going back to those bridges that you develop hopefully over time with the different groups on campus that are experiencing these issues firsthand, getting to ask them, what is your take? Where are we at today? What are you worried about? What keeps you up at night? And what keeps you excited about engaging in this work amidst the volatile environment? Because it's always going to be there. That's the really hard part about working in diversity, equity, and inclusion is that
Mm.
the environment's never going to get to a place where it is perfect and where it makes it easy for us to do this work. It's always going to be challenging. It just kind of has a new face over time. So the language that we use changes over time. The issues change over time. The students that we have on our campuses change all the time. And
Mm.
their approaches to conflict change all the time too. And that I think has an influence on this puzzle as well. So it's complicated. And I think it takes time. This is just not one of those things that we can solve overnight. And it's just like allyship, a daily practice that we have to engage in.
Hello, friends. It's Jenny Lee Fowler. Exciting news! I'll be at the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Hosted by Element 451, the Engage Summit is where AI meets higher education. Sessions will focus on cutting edge AI applications that are reshaping student outreach, enhancing staff productivity, and offering deep insights into ROI. This isn't your typical conference. It's a strategic summit where you'll learn from the best about leveraging AI and digital strategies in higher ed marketing. Imagine 2 days filled with hands on sessions, real success stories, and the chance to network with top minds in the field. You'll leave with practical, transformative takeaways as you learn how AI fosters a more personalized, efficient approach from recruitment to student success. Oh, and the best part? The Engage Summit is incredibly affordable. Tickets are just $150 per person. But it gets better. Use the discount code Enrollify50 at checkout, and you can register for just $99. This early bird pricing lasts until March 31st. So join me and many of my fellow Enrollify Network creators at the Engage Summit this coming June. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there. One thing you did say was that, give yourself grace because, we're not going to get this right all the time, but we increase our chances of getting it right if we talk to a diverse group of people before content goes out, right? Like I always tell myself, if I'm creating something, I want people that don't look like me and um and are have different experiences and backgrounds than me to look at the piece of content to let me know if there's something that I'm not seeing. And it's feels like it's especially important when it comes to allyship. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes. One way I did that was I always had a big team of student interns, and I might be the ringleader as a social media manager in terms of coming up with the content and the strategy and, you know, tasking out the tactical work to my student interns. But a part of it was also having weekly or regular meetings with my student intern team to look at our content from a bigger picture and to ask them, is this, first of all, is this cringy? Like, is this
Hmm.
content like
Hmm.
completely misaligned with how you all are talking to your peers? But also, how does this content align with your lived experience if we are talking about something that is focused on culture or identity? And part of that is also hiring a diverse team of student interns in the first place who can speak to many different experiences on campus, not just from the lens of identity, but also do you have a student athlete that you could ask, does this jive with your experience? Or do you have a student leader in the DEI space or a res life student who could talk about what's happening in the residence halls when your content is about life living on campus? Like, there's just so much you get from having those safeguards and those checkpoints when you can call upon a team that represents the diversity of your community, whether that's students on your team or students you happen to know or those faculty or staff in the community that you've built those bridges with.
Totally. And I would even say, because I don't have a large student intern team, but I have folks that I like to um, check in with regularly about content. And I just send it to them and say, Is there something about this I'm not seeing?" And it's a diverse group of sort of colleagues. And you mentioned students that I've gotten to know, and I will just send it, have them review content just to make sure, like you said, it's not cringy or it's not, hello fellow kids, right? Which is, so I'm always checking in. So I think that even if you don't have a group of student interns, I think you can sort of build that network around you, of colleagues and students and staff and in faculty where you can kind of check in with them and have another set of eyes on your content. Um,
Totally.
but another thing I wanted to check, or follow up with you on, is that you said it will always be challenging. DEI work is always going to be hard, and that actually kind of makes me sad.
Mm.
As a social media manager, it makes me sad. As an Asian woman, that makes me sad. And And but I do know and acknowledge that the work is, man, it's hard and it's super challenging. So Matt, why do you keep doing it?
Mm. Well, in the same way that it's always hard, this work is also always rewarding. I
Mm,
went into working in education largely because I felt like there was a huge gap in terms of representation for queer folks, bisexual folks working in this area. In communications, it's a very white field. I felt like every team I've been a part of, I felt that whiteness and that overrepresentation of particular groups. And so as I looked ahead at my career when I was younger, I thought, well, I feel like I need to be part of what's missing because I bear all of these different underrepresented identities and experiences and can help to steer the storytelling or at least ask the right questions along the way to make sure that we are thinking about the intersection of DEI and communications work, which I've always seen as deeply interconnected. But it's always super worth it to do this hard work because I know that there are folks in our communities who were like me as a young student wondering, where am I in this story?
mm,
Does my experience matter? I thought that it was going to be a certain way when I got to this campus based on what I saw on the tour or based on what I saw online. We're able to fill that gap. So it's kind of an honor actually to step into this difficult space and to do this hard work because then that can make all the difference for someone else's experience at our campus. I don't think we talk about that piece enough. I will acknowledge that given today's landscape with DEI, more of my thoughts are about how difficult the work is, but it's a worthwhile reminder to think about what the outcome is of doing this work and how important it can be for somebody to see that represented, even if it's on social media only. That can make all the difference for someone in your community.
I love that answer so much, and I think you're right. We often think of how hard it is, and we don't realize the rewards or, what we're building to, um, which is why it's really important to continue to have these conversations. So thank you for that. But Matt, what is one thing that we can all start doing today, to be a better ally on our channels?
One thing we can each do to practice allyship on our channels is to do the self work first, and then to engage in building those bridges with the communities who you seek to uplift. So I think that can start any day uh, that you have a moment to send that email, to set up that coffee chat, to do research on your institution's website, to even get an understanding of what groups are out there, who is the faculty or staff facilitator for these groups. So before we even get to publishing content, there's work that we can each do to do that research and that self work in preparation for telling those awesome stories on our channels.
I think that's a great answer. I think also learn the language, right? That's really important because that is one challenge I found, is that the the language and the phrases, they change or they get added to all the time. Um, and the best way to really be familiar is to ask, right? Like no one's offended when we ask someone of the LGBTQ community, like, how do you identify? What do you call yourself for? Or, ask the questions, right?
Yes, and getting that language down can also come from simply consuming content, consume queer content, look at what LGBTQIA plus creators are posting on their channels, whether they're part of your community or not. And I felt like this was always one of the tools in my toolbox when I was starting out in social strategy, and why I loved that work so much is because I was a huge consumer of social content. And that helps you to understand as much as you can understand without being a part of that community, what it might be like for someone who is in the queer community, what words that are being used or not used. And like you said, the language changes very rapidly. And that's one of the challenges that I have as someone who's a communications manager focused on DEI is we can't let the language sit for too long because even in the span of a month or two, the words that we use can go out of vogue or become unintentionally marginalizing to the community that we were
Hmm.
originally trying
Hmm.
to uplift, right? So it's people come from a good place, I think, when they try to use that language, but when we fail to do that market research today about what are the right words to use, then I think we can run into kind of going against what we originally set out to do, which was to uplift and honor those stories.
We just talked about what we could start doing. What's one thing that we should stop doing or can stop doing today as social media managers that would be helpful?
One thing we can stop doing as social media folks and as communicators is sequestering these topics to specific recognition months. They're a great place to start. But in my mind, and I haven't put this out quite yet in my own work, but this is something that I toy with, is how do we develop a calendar where we think about talking about recognition month topics or shining a light on specific communities throughout the year in a way that is a both and. So, yes, we are going to do some campaigns in June around Pride Month because queer history is important. And that month is incredibly close to the queer community and our lived experience. But also, what's the conversation like in February when we have Black History Month and we talk about queer Black experiences?
Hmm.
What is it
Mhm.
like in September when we have Hispanic Heritage Month and we can talk about that intersection of being Hispanic or Latina and queer, and all the different ways that you can think about layering these lenses throughout the year? How do we bring that intersectional approach to every month and think about it as we calendar? So I wish I had a clear answer or like a template that I could give people. But right now it's just kind of living in my mind. I think of it as like kind of a wheel where you have the 12 months of the year and you have dots that kind of connect throughout the year so that from the audience perspective, it's like, wow, they're talking about a range of different experiences all year. I don't just see myself in June or in February or in September. It's an all year sort of thing.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, we if we could strive to do that, I think that's ideal, right? So, Matt, what is your confession?
My confession is that I owe my entire career to Tumblr. Of all things, right? If you remember the glory days of Tumblr and blogging, that's actually how I got my first internship in that marketing communications office. I was a nursing student. I did not think I was going to go into any sort of creative work, but because I was using my Tumblr blog to answer what became hundreds of anonymous questions from students who were looking to go to my university, and I used the official hashtag on Tumblr when nobody else was using hashtags right at this point in time.
Wow.
I was noticed by the university comms office, and I was crossing campus one day, and the first ever student intern who ever worked in that kind of digital content role was passing me by and said, "Hey, are you that guy from Tumblr? I see your posts all the time. Do you want an internship? I'm graduating. I think that you'd be really good at this." I was like, I'm a nursing student. I'm just posting on my blog for fun. But if you're telling me that you think that I could get a student internship out of doing that more on purpose and more officially for the university, then I'm all for it. And that was what started off my entire career in communications work.
That is a great confession. Are you still on Tumblr?
Yes, but not the same way. I used to be such a daily poster and I used to write so much. And now I've kind of made my blog a lot more obscure. and I'm kind of holding on to it as kind of a time capsule of what things I was thinking about or worried about or happy about when I was younger. I mean, I started my Tumblr blog when I was in high school. So it's kind of a treasure trove of old memories and thoughts that I'll revisit sometimes, but not the same as I used to be on Tumblr.
I feel like there's still an active community on Tumblr. It's been a tough nut to crack for me, but I feel like there's a very loyal and engaged audience on Tumblr.
Oh yeah, Tumblr used to be. My other confession is that I think that there was a time where Tumblr was kind of like the height of the internet for me and the height of internet culture for me in terms of feeling so connected every day that I went on Tumblr and posted and looked at other people's blog posts. There was a time where I wished everybody had a Tumblr because I wanted to have that insight into what everyone else was thinking or experiencing. And that era has kind of come and gone. We've seen a lot of change with Tumblr over the years, but you're right, there is still an engaged audience on Tumblr that I think is worth thinking about as part of your communication strategy. Um, yeah, we were so much more purposeful with Tumblr when it was at its height. I think now, I don't know if I would recommend diving as deeply into Tumblr as you might with other platforms where your audience is more there and it's easier to measure. But I do think it's at least interesting for that research part because the queer community has always been very plugged in to Tumblr.
That is a great fact to know. That's a great tip. Well, thank you so much for sharing that confession. And Matt, it was really great to have you on. And thanks for having this conversation with me.
Thanks, Jenny.
Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Mallory Wilsey, and so many others of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.